Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 6, Episode 4, Behind the Lines. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
Absolutely. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great. We're awesome. We're a great time. I hope that you are enjoying us going through this show that's 30 years old and enjoying it as much as we are. Yes, we are talking about Behind the Lines. It is the fourth episode in a six-episode arc, one of the first times it's ever been done in the history of Trek. So we're kind of looking at not a the whole to be continued per se. This is more like a little mini saga that kind of sets the stage for everything that's getting ready to happen up to the end of the show. So before we get into all that, of course, like to as always, check in. So David, how has your week been?
It's been fine. I finished kind of playing a game. It's a Metroidvania style game called Animal Well, which again, kind of a funny name, like the last game I played. Metroidvania is the idea is that you can kind of explore the map pretty freely, but there are areas locked off to you behind abilities you have to get. So once you get an ability, you can traverse further and explore and find things. Um, it was fun, definitely fun. Very simple game, not very expensive. So it was fun to play that one. It turns out that the creator was one guy who made the entire game. Pretty impressive. He hid a bunch of stuff. Like there's like when you get to the end credits, it's like you kind of beat one final boss. But then it turns out there's still a lot more stuff you can do after that. I'm not going to do all that, which is why I said I kind of completed it because I looked it up and it's like you have to go online and like work with other people to complete the extra parts of the game. I'm like, I'm good, thanks. I don't need to go online and look up, forums to figure out how the next puzzle gets solved. I had fun exploring the game, and it was a good time. Yeah, how about you?
Well, before we get about into me, I just wanted to say, do you ever find that like kind of takes away from some enjoyment elements of the game? Like that's really popular. The whole going online, going into forums, watching YouTube people play the games, doing like that. Do you feel like that's like not necessarily a waste of time, but just you're spoiling yourself for the game and doing that, or do you still find any enjoyment like after you've watched someone do it or they've discussed how to do it to then go back and do it their way?
I mean, I definitely watched people play it like after I had completed it, or there were definitely like you're supposed to collect a bunch of literal Easter eggs. You're supposed to go find eggs for whatever reason, and there are 64 of them, and so you have to find them in weird places. And it's always fun to find one for yourself or figure out a puzzle for yourself and like watch people play the game. Like you're stuck on a section and you're watching someone else play it to kind of get an idea of how to get past it, but you're watching them do a thing and they can't figure out something that you figured out, and it's like, ha, I was smarter than you in this one thing. So that's fun. But yeah, there's definitely, I mean, literally the end of the game, like all of this end game content is like super hidden. Like you have to really be like eagle-eyed to get a lot of this stuff. And at that point, I was like, I don't care to be that meticulous. I don't want to be crawling around this game trying to find every little detail. It's more
Mm,
fun to realize that there are people who have done it and then hear how they do it and then see what the solved
yeah.
puzzle looks like. Because at that point, it's literally ridiculous. Like you literally have to be playing the game multiple playthroughs so eagle-eyed that basically the internet had to figure all these puzzles out as a group, and by the time I came around they'd already solved it all, so I got to see what the solved puzzle looked like. But realizing that they all had to get together and like talk about it was like, oh my god. Like, I don't have patience for that. I'm glad someone else did.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Like I don't mind watching sometimes when people are doing like gameplay when they're doing like the story version of the game. So you can get all of the little
Yeah,
cutscenes and clips put together to make
100%.
the story.
Yes.
I don't mind those, but it's the other
Yes.
ones where they're like trying to tell me all the little tips and tricks and how this breaks down into this and how you gotta stack your weapons to make it a certain way, and I don't like that. To me, that is a part of the the joy and discovery of the game, finding my own combinations that I like or that I know work or don't work or whatever the situation is.
Right.
That's what I enjoy. So yeah, when
Right.
I see a lot of these, and it's like Twitch is a massive streaming platform, and there's a lot of that. You can go and just enjoy watching people play a game, sure, but there's a lot of people on there who just it's almost like they're doing some kind of weird tutorial
Right.
about the game. I just don't really enjoy that, but I mean, apparently a lot of people do because it's pretty popular. So I was just curious what your stance was on that
Yeah.
since you brought it up.
Yeah.
Uh, as for me, I have not been doing much this week beyond work. I'm getting ready to take a trip back to my home state to see some people I haven't seen in a very long time, and really looking forward to that. So I've been kind of keeping everything just very low key to be ready for the trip. I have been playing, since we're talking about games, Star Trek Online a lot. Um, I'd gotten into it off and on several times throughout its existence, but now I really feel like I finally got to that point where I can say I'm committed. I play at least one mission session something a day, and then there's so much stuff that you can do, that's just little like side quests basically. But I was just looking earlier today, as a matter of fact, and it looks like I may be coming to an end on the storied missions that they had.
Mm.
Now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, from what I was looking at, they have retired over the years. So there's a lot of missions that just don't exist anymore, but you can get those again if you want to pay for them.
Mhm.
I don't know how I feel about that just yet, because typically I'm notorious for not spending money on um, online games and DLCs and everything else. I feel very much like the games, it should be there, like it should be complete. I shouldn't have to do a DLC to continue a game. Um, but considering the expansiveness of this game, the platform that it's on, and that it's always changing, I might somewhere down the road do it. It's like it's like $10. I don't know, but I have to get myself there for that. So we'll see.
Right.
But other than that, I've been enjoying what you can do on it so far. There's so much in the way of like customization of characters, uniforms, ships, crews, duty rosters. I mean, there's a lot to do before you ever really have to feel like you need to pay for something. So I'm very satisfied with the game
Mhm.
so far. And the stories have been great. I love the callbacks to old things from episodes you've probably, have forgotten, So great stuff. So if you're interested, I would strongly suggest making yourself a little character. Again, right now the game is free to play. You only really pay for extra stuff that you may decide you want to download and have a part of your account, but anybody can sign up at any time and start exploring. So, um, have at that what you will. I've also been very excited with the fact that Paramount Plus now has all of Trek on it except for Prodigy. That this includes all the movies. So if you are a person who wants to do a total historical deep dive, you can go all the way back and watch the original series, the animated series, follow through with the movies before starting Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, so forth and so on. You can get it all knocked out. I don't know how long that would take to watch all of Trek from beginning to end. Um, Several months at least. So who knows? Maybe I'll commit to doing it one day just to start it and see how long it takes me to
Well,
get through all of Trek.
24/7 watching,
Yeah,
or like you do an hour a
yeah.
night, or
Well, um, essentially 24. I would do it 24/7 to where to what I mean by
what
that
would it be
is
if you literally compacted it down to?
right. And if well, it compacted it down to anytime you were watching, viewing anything, it was Star Trek. So I
Okay.
understand that you may need to take breaks for work, for example, and obviously sleeping. But if your TV, computer,
If
your
your
tablet,
sole
whatever,
entertainment was
your
just
sole
Star
source,
Trek,
right, was
and if
just
the
Star
average
Trek,
American looks at a screen 3 hours a day,
yes. How long would it take you to watch all of Trek to completion? That's the question. So, yeah, you sleep 8 hours, you work a 10-hour shift, you have meals and dinner and whatever else, and then that free time there, how long would it take you to get through all of it? So who knows?
Yeah.
I try to look at weird ways to, not have to engage with people, I guess. So we'll go from there. But we will now switch gears and talk about our the reason that we're here, of course. Oh, real quick, since it was asked, my home state is Kentucky, so I'll be going back to Kentucky. But now, again, back to our show. We are talking about this pretty unusual episode for the way that it's set up for the fourth season, or not the fourth season, but the fourth episode of the sixth season, the fourth episode in this six episode arc. And by all accounts, the more difficult one to put together for them, both on screen and behind the scenes, for a couple of different reasons that we'll get into as we talk about it. But before we do that, David, would you like to give the summation?
I can. Okay. All right. So again, this is behind the lines. So there's two plot lines going on, and it's arguable that the Cisco Defiant plot line is the B plot. So uh, the Kira Deep Space Nine plot being more of the A plot. I'll get to in a second because the Cisco plot is pretty easy. Basically, they're back with the Defiant, and uh, there's a admiral that they're working with, Admiral Ross,
Mhm.
who tasked the Defiant to attack a massive sensor array that is being used by the Dominion to track ship movement of Starfleet. Starfleet intelligence has recently discovered this sensor array, but of course it's heavily guarded. Now the Defiant being able to cloak gives it an advantage of a um, attack on this sensor array. So they're going to send the Defiant, but Cisco gets promoted to work under Admiral Ross, and so he is not going to be commanding the mission. Instead, Dax is given command, and after some awkward moments of Cisco going on the bridge and O'Brien saying everything's good to go, Captain, and Dax being like great because now she's captain of the ship. But Cisco answers to Captain, just being kind of an awkward moment. The Defiant goes on this mission without Cisco and comes back having successfully completed the mission. Of course, Dax is joking, and others are joking that she'll be back for her wedding to Worf. So even though there is a moment where Worf and Cisco are worried about Defiant, and there is a moment where Admiral Ross admonishes Cisco for staying up late worrying about the Defiant. Like you have more things to worry about now than just your ship. You need to get some sleep. But Cisco's like, I can't sleep. I'm gonna be up. So you could command me to go to my room, but I'm gonna be up anyway. So anyway, the ship comes back successfully, having completed this mission, which obviously will be a huge boon to the future war because the Starfleet is losing the war right now. But presumably, this will be a moment of turning that all around. Okay, but going to the A plot, we have Major Kira, Odo, Jake, and Rom working as the rebellion, this little cell to try and stop the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion taking over. And we open up with them having Rom had heard that there was a document that the what's the guy's name who Damar is the Cardassian officer under Gul Dukat. Kira hears from Rom that he's working on something about how to neutralize the Jem'Hadar soldiers once they run out of white, and so she steals that from Damar and gives it to the Jem'Hadar so that they start a fight in Quark's bar, and so it's proof that they're successfully creating tension amongst these Dominion and the Cardassians. But unfortunately for her, the changeling that Odo has interacted with the most, the woman shapeshifter, the changeling, she comes to the station and starts talking to Odo. And Odo, who was upset about the whole Jem'Hadar fighting with the Cardassians because of what Kira had done, he had suggested that that was too risky, too dangerous. He starts talking with the changeling woman, and they link. And Odo is unfortunately affected by the link. The first time he does it with her, he really seems to be kind of affected by it and scares Kira. And she is like, "You can't do that. You can't link with her." Uh, she's worried initially that he would be giving up information about their little rebellious their cell, but Odo assures her, "Oh no, nothing happens. That she can't know my like I can't transfer information, but I can transfer thoughts and feelings." So kind of a weak excuse. Um, Later, Quark overhears Damar talking about the way that they'll finally destroy the minefield that the Federation left to keep the wormhole from allowing the Dominion to keep sending ships through. They've been having trouble the whole time of destroying the minefield, and he thinks he's found a way to destroy it. And so Quark, having gotten drunk, drinking with Damar to find the information out, reveals to the resistance cell, Kira and Rom in particular, what to do to stop this from happening. Rom is going to have to sabotage something to stop it from happening. So Kira tells Odo to turn off a bunch of alarms in the area that need to be sabotaged so that Rom can do his work. Unfortunately, Odo is once again approached by the female changeling, and they once again do a link. And at this point, he's so invested in the link that he chooses basically to not do what he had promised of turning off the alarms. And so Rom gets captured. Kira is extremely angry and frustrated with Odo, but he reveals that, now that he's joined the Great Link, nothing else matters. The last 5 years, his infatuation with her, and the female changeling is in the room actually with Odo when Kira goes to confront him. So Odo seems to be compromised, if not outright betraying our group in order to
Mhm.
feel the pleasurable joy of joining with the Great Link, or at the very least with the female changeling, who reveals that she basically is not really any different. She's not an individual so much as just a part of the Great Link. There is no individuality so much as just a larger Great Link amongst the changelings. So, yeah, that's the episode. Did I
Mhm.
miss anything, Perry? You think?
Nope, you hit the highlights, and again, what little bits maybe were missed, we will definitely cover here. So there actually is a lot to unpack in this episode. Like I said, these six really do set that foundation, that framework for everything that's getting ready to come. Character development, overall story plot, all of it. So I would really consider these six episodes um, absolutely necessary, essential to watch if you want to understand any of the dynamics of anything that happens from here on out. Even something as simple as um, the character Damar, who is drinking a lot in this episode. All of these things, there are reasons. So, not gonna give you too much in the way of spoilers. Just want to point out some stuff to you to be aware of, so that for those of you who haven't seen it before, you can be alerted that there is significance here. Um, now, the first thing that I want to have us start with, of course, will be our what's considered our A plot line here, which is Cisco transitioning out of being at the forefront. He is no longer in command of the Defiant. He is now the adjutant or adjunct or whatever the heck they called him under Admiral Ross, and he is now um, basically strategizing big picture stuff, deploying troops and ships and ship movements and everything else. And Dax is now taken over on the Defiant.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the way that they've showed this transition. I don't have any military background, but I would imagine that stuff like this must happen a lot when officers are promoted and they reach certain ranks that do remove them from the front lines, and having to make that transition into you are no longer the one whose foot's on the pedal, so to speak. You are directing the motion, you're directing the action, you're also far removed from the consequence. If that ship is damaged, those troops die, whatever, you weren't directly in command, you were safe elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
um, as we know for Cisco, he's been a person who's always been very much in the thick of things. He likes to be down in the trenches. He likes to be very hands-on, and we see him struggle here with moving away from that. How did you feel in watching those scenes in this development, a new development for Ben in this way?
Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. It made sense. This was wartime. Even if it wasn't wartime, anytime you get a promotion, but it takes you away from your ship, your crew, that's gotta suck. Even if
Mhm.
it is a promotion, congratulations is what the admiral says to him after he promotes him, and Cisco is leaving. And Cisco is clearly like kind of disappointed. He says to the admiral like, "Oh, like the whole time we've been playing this mission, I thought I was going to be the one leading the mission. I thought it was going to be the captain of the Defiant. It is kind of Cisco's ship. He helped create it. It's been with us since season 3, right?
Mhm.
So it's been around for a while now. We've seen it get pretty beat up. It's going through repairs even as the episode starts. There's a fun conversation where O'Brien is explaining to not Rom, Nog, that the whoever is commanding a ship is called captain, regardless of rank, because of the way ships were called, or captain was always the captain, even on seafaring vessels on Earth. And so Nog has a fun little, oh, so if I somehow was captain of if I somehow came in command of the ship, I would be called captain. And O'Brien's like, bro, by the time
Yeah.
anyone by the time you became captain of the ship, there'd be no one left to call you captain. So don't get your hopes up anytime
Right,
soon.
right.
Fun little moment.
Put that little
Um,
fantasy aside because it's
yeah,
never gonna happen. But okay.
yeah. But it's a fun moment, little lore building. Yeah,
Mhm.
captains for the seafaring vessels, blah blah blah. Fun little moment. And then of course that leads directly into, all right, Captain, things are ready. And Dax answers, but Cisco's now on the bridge, and they both answer.
They both answer yes.
And so we
Mhm.
know Cisco is not. He's reluctantly parting with his ship. He wants it back. I think he even says that at one point to Dax, actually, like I'll be back, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'll be back. Like, don't get too comfortable. This
but
is,
yeah, that's
you
my
know,
chair right
yeah.
there.
And
So
he, and of course, we, it was supposed to be taken that he's saying this in jest, but as we know, he's very attached to the Defiant. And like you said, the Defiant has been with us for quite a long time. But it's important to remember that Cisco also had a hand in the overall development of the Defiant in the first place. So it's not just a ship that came along and he begrudgingly came to tolerate and then love. The man's been instrumental in putting
yeah,
it together since day one.
right,
So yeah, this is a definite moment for him that he is now having to give up uh, the prototype basically, because remember this is the first generation
right,
um, Defiant. He's having to
yeah.
give that one up there. So yeah, his literal baby, he has to pass off to Dax. Which I mean, if it was going to be to anybody, it has to be Dax because of their
Well, Worf was kind of the
relationship.
guy, but he's
Well,
over
yeah,
with
but I mean, like when it
Admiral.
for the yeah, if you're looking at it from that familial sense, Dax makes the most sense considering her significance to Cisco. But
100%. Oh yeah, she definitely fits the role.
oh yeah,
Bashir has one line at the end of the
yeah,
episode about like, "Hey, tell this one girl, a
yeah,
subordinate probably, that I was actually here and doing this." To like,
right.
he wants to get
I'm
in with
I'm
her.
trying to get some action. Can you come over here
I'm
and
like,
speak to?
Bashir, that was a
Yeah.
season 1 attribute. Haven't you moved on from
Well,
that?
and yeah, and I think that's also kind of the point that they were trying to show that he hasn't changed
Yeah.
because remember we've had a lot of development with Bashir as of late.
Oh
We know
yes.
about him being augmented. He's got the superior DNA and all that kind of stuff. So give us a little throwback of Bashir still being quintessential Bashir,
Yeah.
so that we're not afraid of him, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah,
um
and I forgot to mention that when the episode starts with Cisco, he brings, I guess it's the battery cell or
yeah,
the
the power
torpedo
cell from
cell
the phasers, the power
phasers
cell from the phasers
to the
to the
room,
mess
like
hall.
to the mess hall on the Defiant, and they have like already 7 of them laid up. It's like the eighth
Mhm.
one. It's like, hey, we're still fighting, we're still here. Gives a speech. When Dax does it, I didn't. It didn't have the same oomph. It felt like
Yeah.
she was just copy pasting his speech, which I think she kind of did, frankly.
Well,
Like
no,
she
she
was,
does.
it's a
She
ritual.
she does, and that's what they say. That's what Cisco
Yeah,
says early on, that it's a ritual they have fallen into.
right,
That so I always assumed that, when they exhausted the first one or maybe the second one, he made this speech, he made this kind of whatever, and then he just kind of got into the pattern of saying it every time. And so
right,
now it's kind of become their de facto litany they say whenever one of these things is retired. So now
yeah,
that she is stepping firmly into his role, she's the captain. This was her mission, and they once again exhausted one of these things on the mission. Now is her opportunity to say it herself. Which,
yeah. I just wish she had taken it more on her. Like she had made it her own a bit more because it felt like
yeah,
she literally just memorized Cisco's version, which again might be exactly what Cisco was doing, just repeating it every
yeah,
time. But it did feel a bit kind of jarring at first because I knew what she was doing, but I was like, it sounds exactly like what Cisco said. Like you're
yeah.
not gonna like do your own version. Like once
No,
again, here we are after another successful mission. I mean, again, it is that speech, but it just felt, I don't know. Yeah.
well, no, I agree with you, but I'm going to defend Dax here because I believe that was intentional, in the sense that this was to yet again solidify for everyone in the room and also us as viewers that Cisco was no longer in command. This was not his ship. Yes, there were things, there were traditions and whatever else that were continuing, but as in any situation, when a person moves on, we don't just abandon the things that were established when they were here. We continue on with in a certain degree. Yeah, we can tweak things here and there, but I mean, this was fresh. This was new. This is her first outing really as captain here.
Right.
And so yeah, she's going to continue on in the footsteps that in the with the groundwork that he's laid. So it made sense, but it also was like that's why it's jarring because we're used to Ben here. We're used to his rhythms, his cadence, his delivery, and now we're having to see someone else in this new light and we're not ready for it. It would be different if he had like died and left the show or whatever and now they were doing things differently to establish a new beat, but that's not the case here. He's still there. He's watching, so
Right.
we have to feel as awkward as he probably felt watching this transition happen. So I think that they did it pretty well. So I enjoyed it. I feel like it hit exactly what it's supposed to make us feel that not the same. It's not our
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
might be it. That's true. The other thing I want to say about all this plot line is that, as I've said multiple times before, is I think Cisco would be like, I feel like the role of being commander of a station, Deep Space Nine, that's an admiral role. That's the role for someone who would be commanding ships. This is a dangerous territory. We need
like
someone who has the authority to command ships to go here and there. The
like
fact they only
Admiral
have
Ross
the
on Starbase 375.
exactly, and so the fact that poor Cisco only has the little old Defiant. I mean, the Defiant's been doing some heavy lifting. Let me put it that way.
Yes, it
And when
has.
it literally did at the end of last season, when it was the only ship except for Martok coming in at the last minute to like put all the mines out. I mean, it's a show where it's much easier to focus on smaller things. Like if we had a
Hmm.
whole fleet, it'd be hard to keep track of stuff. So I get it. Heck, Battlestar Galactica, it's all about the Battlestar Galactica, and the fleet
Well,
is great, but
It's a,
we're
yeah,
all
it's a,
about
it's about
Battlestar.
them protecting the fleet. But I used to actually make that criticism about that show. As much as I loved Battlestar, um, you're a fleet. You got all these ships, but we only see you ever go on like what, two, three ships? Like you're surrounded by ships. I mean, yeah, we've seen you on a total of like three of them
Right.
for the three seasons. Then, like in the fourth season, they finally introduced like one or two other little ships, but then it was nothing.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about Battlestar and Star Trek, there's an Easter egg in Battlestar Galactica in the fourth season where if there's a shot that they do of the fleet and all
Mhm.
the ships are whizzing by. If you look closely, one of the ships in the fleet is the Starship Enterprise. So winking a nod to Trek and to
There you
Ronald
go.
Ronald Moore's association with Trek. There's a quick flyby, and it's the Constitution class Enterprise. That's Kirk's Enterprise. It's in there.
Gotcha.
So
I wonder if
be on the
that
lookout.
created any problems copyright wise. Is that an issue or?
I don't think so. Well, they did it. They also did it in Star Trek: First Contact, the movie. when they're doing the big Borg battle and all the
Yeah.
Starfleet ships are flying around. If you look closely in one of the frames, the Falcon flies past. So
Star Wars got in
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. I guess
So
everyone's just borrowing from everybody else. All
yeah, I
right.
think that everybody does it. And then also in Battlestar
I
Galactica
mean,
in
I want
the
to be very clear. That's amazing. Everyone
yeah,
should do it at some point.
well,
It's all
so,
one big happy family of sci-fi shows and
yeah.
movies. We all give a little shout out to
Well,
everybody else. But yeah,
there's
go ahead.
another one in Battlestar. In the pilot episode of Battlestar Galactica, there's a scene where there's a bunch of ships like taking off from Caprica or wherever, and there's just like a bunch of ships going a bunch of different directions and everything. If you look closely, one of the ships taking off is Firefly from the show Firefly. It
Nice.
takes off. So
Ah,
yeah, I think they all do it. I think it's pretty funny that
yeah, for
when you do
sure.
it, but you got to be watching to catch it.
Well, it's
Now you can
probably
go on YouTube and see them, but yeah,
it's probably true that like the special effects companies were all either the same one or they're so interrelated that it's very easy to be like, hey, let me borrow your model of your ship for my quick scene
yeah,
right here.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I'm sure there's a lot of that. I'm sure, and not only just borrowing of scenes. I'm sure there's a borrowing of people.
yeah,
Oh, can we have your tech group for this? And hey, we're gonna, they've got contracts that fly back and forth, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who just, yeah, they think it's funny to stick a Star Wars ship in a Star Trek whatever, and so forth and so on. So
right,
not even a problem.
yeah.
Come
The
back to me when you are CGIing in people, like when there's a scene in The Mandalorian and Jean-Luc Picard walks through the bar. Like that's when I really want to.
I
Uh,
haven't heard about that one. I'll have to watch that one too. The one last thing I'll say about this plot is that it was a little jarring having the establishing shot of this starbase every time they brought it up because it looked exactly the same every single time. It was like deja vu every time they showed it on screen. Like there was no change as far as I could
well,
tell. The
it's
Defiant,
Starbase.
well, but the Defiant was always right
Oh,
here.
precisely in the exact same. It
Yeah,
was never. It was never orbiting.
yeah, and it always
Yeah,
had like the other like Enterprise style ships like up in the distance. Like it didn't look like they had done much to really make it feel like this place was active. It just felt
yeah, like it's
jarring.
like isn't it? Yeah, is it an active area of space or not? I get what you're saying
And
because
I
they
was
also it was a very tight scene. They
right,
wanted to fit in the starbase, but also the Defiant. You had like one or two ships here and there. This has more to do with how shows were filmed back then
right.
than anything else. So with that format for television, the screen ratio was different. So this would have looked different on a TV in the 90s versus us watching the now on our majorly large flat screens or your computer monitors or whatever. So yes, to us it looks weird, but back then this would have looked appropriate. So always
Yes.
keep in mind that aspect ratio is different. And also, like if they were to film this scene today, there probably would have been way more ships hovering, flying around
Yeah,
to
for
make it
sure.
look like this is a busy port at a time of war.
Right. Well, part of the reason I bring that up is because it was kind of slow for me to click for me that we were not going to go with the Defiant at all on this mission. I Up until the end of the episode, I thought we were going to at least be with Dax and O'Brien
Yeah,
and
see them
Nog
play
on
out
this
the
quick
mission.
mission because
Mhm.
they made it clear it was dangerous that they were going to have to go through a star cluster, which was not possible. But Dax had figured it out, so I was
Mhm.
like ready for like some exciting Dax is like having to be
Yeah.
commander of the ship and like
Yeah, no, the
do their
mission sounded
thing.
really dangerous and
It
interesting. They're gonna have
did,
to fly through a bunch of weird stars, and Dak's gotta be
yeah.
in command and the scientist to figure it out. I would have loved to see that too, but
They
again
made it about Cisco and then
yes,
Worf showing up being like they're late. And again, it's not
yes.
like it was a bad choice. In fact, it probably fit better with the overall time frame they had to work
Mhm.
with because we had our other plot going.
Yes.
And they didn't have time to like show a whole mission, that kind of thing. But I was a little disappointed because, as you just said, it sounded like a fun mission. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And it certainly would have changed the way that the B plot story played out as well, which ends up being our more exciting story that we get into because it's way more complex. Trying to do two complex stories like this, it never works out well. It ends up ultimately one of those needing it. There's never is going to be in a show like that, there would never be a B plot. That story would have been the entire episode. Them
Right.
trying to do two would have been too much. So and with the need for this part of the storytelling that we see in the B plot, I can understand why they really tried to focus on making this a bit more of a quieter, understated story that was more about Cisco's growth as a leader
Right.
than about the actual mission itself.
Yeah,
Now,
it would have been
as
another mission amongst other
yeah,
missions. This that would have undermined the character building plot elements.
yeah,
So yeah, made sense.
yeah.
Um, but
So now
yeah.
we can go ahead and transition into our B story since we were just talking
Oh
about it,
man.
and we've got a lot going on here. So as we said in our recap here, we've got Kira, Odo, Rom, Dukat, Weyoun, Damar, and the female changeling who we have not seen since season 4 is now here, and
Been
they're
that
all
long.
working around. Yeah, this is the first time that she has been back, and man, is she back in a big way.
I guess it was at the end of season 4 when Odo was unchangelinged,
Yes.
um, that we'd last seen her. Okay, that
Hmm.
makes sense. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I have to say this part of the episode starts off pretty clunky because we see uh, Rom and Kira standing at Cork's bar. They're on the balcony looking down, and Kira is basically narrating everything that's happening
Yeah,
down there.
narrating the action, man.
And it. I mean, you
It
need someone
fits.
to explain to you what's happening because the way they're doing it. But it just came off as a bit clunky because it's like, Kira, why are you out loud explaining everything to him, who's your co-conspirator? Anyway, it was a little clunky, but it got clear what was going on.
Hmm.
She had stolen a document, which she then gave to the Jem'Hadar, and that got them into a fight with the Cardassians, and people died in the bar fight. And that causes Weyoun to have to try and put on a pretty, smile with the Cardassian, with Gul Dukat. Gul Dukat doesn't like the situation, but um, yeah, I mean, gets the episode started at least. So
Yeah. Um. So I have to admit, like I like that opening scene. I like the way it was almost like they were marionetting the
yes,
key players
well, it was so
in this scenario, and then
yeah.
chaos erupts, and I just all I needed was for somebody to be like, "Dance, puppets, dance,"
Yeah.
so that it would
Well,
all just play out so well.
well, it would have been really funny if like everything she was saying was just her making it up. She didn't actually know what was going on. She was just pretending, which is why it was awkward that it actually was what was happening. Like she accurately was saying back and forth this and that. But yeah, it was a fun little moment. I mean, it's a fun moment because Kira knows what's happening and she's gleefully watching all of her machinations take place.
Hmm.
It's just again just felt a little clunky.
And so then, as we see that even though this was a very successful bit of sabotage by our newly formed resistance committee, um, it doesn't sit well with Odo, who then challenges Kira and is asking her why she went through with this, and he's trying to make it sound like he's fighting the good fight, but from the inside. He's sitting on this council. He's doing what he can to keep Bajor out of the war, and he doesn't need her stirring up trouble. And she's pointing out to him, because Kira's had her own bit of an awakening here, as we saw in not the last episode, but the one before with Vedic Yasim, that she was very complacent and she doesn't want that anymore. She's now taking a more active role in helping the Federation, and she wants everybody on board. And Odo is just not. It's not to say that he has given up per se, but he is so focused on keeping this sense of order and justice on the station that he just doesn't want to have anything come in that will upset the balance he's trying to enforce.
Yeah, he says
And
to
Kira's
Kira
not
like,
with that.
yeah, he says, I don't want something to happen that would give Gul Dukat reason to throw every Bajoran off the station, which is a legitimate concern.
Mhm.
But Kira does something pretty egregious in this moment. She starts saying, like, maybe you shouldn't have been on this council when it was her idea. She was the one who said to
She
Odo,
did
you
push him to
should
be on
do
the
it.
council. Yeah, she
I,
did.
I
She was
was,
one.
when she did that, I was like,
Yeah.
either this is bad writing, like someone forgot how that whole thing went down, or the character is pulling a this is a bad moment for her because she's the one
Yeah.
who pushed Odo to do it, and now these are the consequences. I mean, he does have a legitimate concern, so I feel like she's talking out of both sides of her mouth in that scene, especially,
Okay.
which is frustrating. But
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, now in looking back on that episode, I mean, she did tell him to consider it when they were talking about sitting on the council. She did tell him to consider it and what it would mean having him on the council and everything else. But it did seem like in that episode, ultimately, the decision was Odo's. However, as we see in this episode, and as we hear from Odo himself, Kira has a very strong sway over Odo. And her telling him to consider it was basically the endorsement he needed to go ahead and go through with it. So yeah, then her coming back here and being like, "This was a bad idea. You sitting on the council is yeah, that can be kind of harsh." Which
Yeah.
is also how he takes it. You know, he's upset with the fact that they are having this fight, and he reveals as much to the female shapeshifter when she shows up and talks about um, his feelings for Kira. Which he's very open, he's very candid with this female changeling, which considering how they initially start their meeting, I have to admit I was surprised by. As you'll
Yeah,
recall, she comes into his office and he kind of takes her to task for taking his powers away,
right.
and then how he later has them restored.
Yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, Odo goes from, and Kira points this out. Like, this female changeling has lied and deceived Odo on multiple occasions. She has not been
Like from day one, she has
yeah,
manipulated him. Like, let's not forget that when he finally made it through the Amarian Nebula, landed on the planet for the very first time, even then they were keeping secrets from him.
exactly.
You know,
And when he's talking about, you guys made me a solid, and she's like, well, you killed one of our own, and this was the only punishment we could really give to fit the crime. And he said, well, I'm a changeling now, so what are you going to do about it? And she's like, I forgive you now. And it's like,
yeah, the way she says it, I have to admit that scene really bothered me too. Because the way she says it, she makes it sound like, "Oh, we gave you your powers back because everything was forgiven." But if you remember, he got his powers back because he took care of the baby changeling, and it died anyway, and he
right.
absorbed it into himself.
And
So
that
unless
somehow
there was
restores his
some,
abilities. Yes.
yeah, unless there was some kind of grand meta level planning,
Yeah.
there's just no way that that series of events could have worked out that
It's
they
gaslighting.
orchestrated
Yeah.
it.
It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
things
she
are
tries to make
bad.
it
You're great.
right. She
I
tries to
forgive
make it
you.
sound like we did that. Oh, we saw the way you took care of the baby, so we gave you your powers back. No, ma'am.
Yeah.
That is not
Yeah.
what happened at all. You're not
And
going to
so,
take credit for the sacrifice the baby made, you
yeah.
know. So
Well, and
yeah.
then later on, Odo's like, "Oh, don't worry, I didn't tell her about the resistance cell because I can't trade. Like, it's not an information sharing thing. It's just thoughts. We trade
Well,
thoughts."
he backtracks really quick, and that's like if you watch that scene, I didn't like that scene at all because he backtracks because he says, "Don't worry, she doesn't know anything about the resistance. I didn't tell her anything." Because Kira's making the point of when you link together, you're sharing information. She's going to find out. That's why I don't want you linking with her. And he's like, "No, I can keep it from her." But then he says, "Oh, but she's not keeping anything from me because we were
Right.
linked, and if she was, I would have sensed it." And I was like, "So
Yeah.
wait a
Exactly.
minute,
He wants it
you,
both
yeah,
ways.
you can do this, but she can't. And she's a way better, older, more experienced changeling than you are, and yet somehow you've been able to maintain this pocket of knowledge while also getting stuff from her and
Right.
nothing in return. Come on,
Well,
man."
and what exactly happened at the end of when, like, as you said, the last time we saw her as end of season 4? What happens in that scene or that last episode? Odo is convinced when he goes and joins the Great Link and loses his changeling abilities that it is the leader of the Klingons, whose name I forget at the
Gowron,
moment, Gowron,
Gowron,
has been made a changeling, and it turns out
yes,
that was a lie. They deceived him. They
they deceived
deceived
him once again.
Odo.
They manipulated him once again
Yes, so
to
they were
go and
able
try
to
to kill
hide
Gowron.
information from
Hmm.
him, and he's a young changeling. Even if he could say fight back against their ability to learn information from him, because he's been his own person for so long, he's an individual and therefore has an individual identity. Blah 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 blah. He still is inexperienced with the Great
Yeah.
Link, so I mean, it's clearly an ecstatic moment. He
Yeah, it's
clearly,
it's very overwhelming. Like the moment that she links with him in this episode, he is completely transfixed. So
yes,
there is nothing in this moment that makes me think that he's just enjoying something mildly pleasurable, but otherwise he's under control. He
right,
seems like she has completely overwhelmed him. And then the more that they merge, the worse it becomes for
it
him.
really does.
And then we
I mean,
see the end result is he's so oddly detached.
I really did think that when Kira went in there and had that first argument with him after the first link, that the she was going to leave, and then we were going to be revealed that Odo was actually now the female changeling. The ultimate changeling deception is that she's
Mm-hmm.
actually the changeling we thought was our friend. Like that would be the ultimate deception, but that's not exactly what happens. She's just in the back room behind a
Hmm.
corner. Kira didn't check the. I mean, like she's a changeling. How do you know she's not still in the room?
Right, and that's a great point. As we know that this changeling has impersonated them before.
Oh, a
She
hundred
impersonated
percent.
Kira, several seasons
Yes,
ago.
pre
So, I
season
mean,
three.
yeah,
Yeah,
when Kira barges into Odo's quarters after the fiasco of the mission, and she just immediately launches in on him. That was a thought that I had as well. Was how do you know that's really Odo? Like,
exactly.
he's been associating with the other changeling. How
Yeah,
do you know that's not? And while she's just blabbing everything, where were you? We have this mission. Rom's been arrested. Basically admitting all of it.
yeah,
And how do you know that that's really Odo? And then again, there's no sensor sweep of the room. How does she know that they're alone? I
exactly.
mean, she
I hundred.
smashed open the door
Yeah,
and comes in and just
if the
starts yelling at the man.
Cardassians are as manipulative and
Yeah,
sneaky as anyone else, you'd think they would have bugged Odo's room by now, just to be sure. The Wayun. I'm sure Wayun might be very bowy and very supplicant in front of other changelings and even Odo. But do I think that Wayun could be deceptive in front of a
uh-huh,
changeling if he had to be? 100%. The
absolutely.
guy has no scruples. Don't let's not pretend. So yeah, I uh,
Yeah,
this
a lot
episode
of
was a
thoughts.
little like
Yeah.
uneven. Like it
Hmm.
was interesting. Like Jake appears in the resistance cell, but had nothing to do in this episode. And there's no other there's no other Bajorans in their cell. They're not in contact with someone else. They're just all the
Now,
four of them.
yeah.
Let's
Now
go.
we're made to believe that they are keeping it small, that they're building. They're still in the building phase of
Sure.
things. But yeah, you're right. Like there's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of moving parts here to what they're doing, which it does seem weird that there's not go betweens, messengers, something else to kind of help them play this up that they're building a resistance. And
Yeah.
then of course we have Odo, who back to him in this. He allows the female changeling to control and manipulate him so completely.
Yeah.
And it really is a detraction of the character overall, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because, we have been taking this painstaking trip with him over these past 5 and now 6 seasons of him being this upstanding character who's all about, duty and justice and loyalty and so forth. And yet, as soon as this changeling comes along, he all that is thrown out the window. And even at the end where he's saying, I'm not upset. It doesn't matter. It's whatever. It's the Great Link is the most important thing. And for someone who has been again so maligned and manipulated by these people, for him to just give it up, give up his whole life,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
I didn't like that.
the one thing I thought is that on some level, the idea that he'd be addicted to the Great Link, it makes sense in as much as, I mean, I'll just put it bluntly, sex or drugs are addictive. Um, if you went from being a, virgin, never gonna ever do a thing, and then bam, you're hit with it, I imagine there are some people who are just like, what? Like drugs. We know drugs take people over. So the idea that he would now be like totally changed makes sense only in the fact that he's like an alien and like this is what his people do. So I kind of understood it on some level,
Yeah,
but it was so complete and so yeah, nothing else matters anymore, man. Like Homeboy was like really hitting it
yeah.
hard. It was like
I mean,
Odo, come here, my friend. Like it makes me think that she actually did do something to Odo,
yeah, and I mean, and I wish
and
they
we
would
know
have
she could.
maybe. And I think this would have played better for people if they had maybe played that up a bit. That there is something more to the link in that regard. That it is kind of a form of uh, brainwashing, you
Yeah,
know, and that's why they prefer the link because everyone's the same in the link.
Right.
There's no questions, there's no pressures, there's no um anything external that makes you feel alone or isolated. You're all one, you're all together. And I
Right.
think that they were trying to hit on that message, but how do you convey something like that that is so all encompassing and complete to people who have no frame of reference, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that that's what they were trying to explain also with Kira when she would ask questions of Odo about it, and he was like, "You don't understand. You're not a changeling. You're not in the link. You don't get it." That shared communal experience, cultural experience, growing up in something, being intrinsically a part of something since the beginning of your existence, totally separate from anybody else around you. Um, I think that's what they were going for, but it's being written and then portrayed by people who I don't think have really experienced that. It seems like almost it's a very unique thing for people to experience in the first place. So, not an easy thing to translate on screen, on paper, whatever. So,
Right.
I'm going to give them a pass on not quite hitting the mark with this one. Great attempt, but
Yeah.
it
It
messes up our characters overall.
yeah. This episode moves the plot forward in some important ways. I mean, for example, the idea that Odo would be again changed by a more direct experience with one of the changelings makes sense. It just his character is betrayed because he comes off as too naive
Hmm.
in these moments. Um, like for example, like I mean, I guess it would come off too much rapey like, but if like she kind of held him down somehow and like the great link upon you kind of thing. Again, maybe it's too rapey, it wouldn't work,
Yeah,
we
no,
don't want to
yeah,
have that.
yeah.
But it just felt a little too much. When Kira was yelling at Odo, at first I was like, Kira, calm the hell down. But then later it's like she's right. I was, anyway, it's this episode definitely feels filler in the sense that like things changed and like we have a cliffhanger ending, but we need more to keep
Mhm.
going. And of course, obviously, we're going to get that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But now, of course, we have to talk about some of our side characters and the things that they were up to in these moments. We have Rom, our idiot savant, who recognizes
it
that
really is
uh,
good.
he really is, that the ingenious
Of course, they
method
could do
of
it unless.
unless, right, and Quark is right there to make fun of him like a good brother would be. So we have Rom who is the one who came up with the self-replicating mines, this ingenious,
In the
diabolical
middle
way
of
of keeping the enemy out. And then in of the blink of an eye, he's like, "Oh, here's the one fatal flaw that I completely forgot about that will render them completely useless if you do
yeah.
this one thing."
Why didn't you
So
think of that, Quark? And what does he say? Like, why did?
I don't know. He doesn't know. Like that's how Cork marks him when it's
Yeah.
revealed what the
I mean, you
situation
could
is.
say he was in the middle of planning his, shotgun wedding at the last minute before the invasion, but they didn't
Yeah,
say that.
and there were a lot of changes. He was trying to plan a wedding. The the Dominion is barreling down on them. All kinds of stuff was going on. So him forgetting about this thing, yes, understandable. But Quark is not going to let that pass.
Nope.
And speaking of Quark, we have this guy who just a few episodes ago was advocating for the Dominion and how their occupation of the station and Bajor wasn't that bad. And he reminds them in the bar, think about it. Remember, Major, last time there were, chains, fences separating parts of the promenade. People were dying and starving in corners and huddled masses and all that. He goes,
Hmm.
now, I mean, there's none of that. Everything's clean. The lights are on. You're still getting fed. You're doing your jobs. Like, there's no problem. It's not that bad. And
Right.
now here he is, and he's like, I hate Cardassians. They're arrogant, they're mean, they're pushy, they're just awful. And then the Jem'Hadar, they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't
They just
sleep.
stand
They
there like
just
statues.
stand there like statues staring at you.
Yeah.
He's just, the night and day difference here that he's had from his corner, his experience with them, of course. And this has been the thing that has now brought him to the
You think he had to
resistance.
get You think he had to get drunk in order to admit that I want to sell root beer again. He would never uh
Oh yeah,
sober
yeah.
admit to it.
I think that yeah, I think he had to get drunk to realize that things were much better with the Federation. That you might not he might not agree with humans as they like to call us, but um that he prefers us to the Cardassians. We laugh, we tell stories, we play games, we gamble, we drink, and have fun in the holosuites. We don't beat him up if we lose at Domjot or Davo. Yeah, I think that he realizes that things were better and he misses that. I wouldn't necessarily say he misses his friends Miles and Julian, but I think he misses the overall presence.
Right.
And yeah, then of course he gets drunk with Damar with Kanar, and we see Damar drink a lot and
The
begins
20
to
year 27, I think, is
yes the
something
aged
27.
Kanar, and we see that Damar likes to drink, and when Damar drinks, Damar gets chatty,
Hmm.
and that's when now Gul Damar, promoted Gul Damar, reveals.
Was he promoted yet, or he was anticipating it?
Yeah, like I think it was intimated that because of what he has discovered, he's the promotion's guaranteed. We don't see them bestow the title upon him, but
That's
as
what I'm
we
getting
know
at. Like,
from
was he getting drunk early? Because I think he said he was about to get
yeah,
the
he was
promotion,
about to,
so
yeah, but he
he
was but
was
he was sure that it was going to guarantee him
right,
the spot, which
right,
changed the course of history, as he says. So, in what we know of Cardassians, that makes sense. They're all about big moves and things that are done in the service and loyalty of the Cardassian state. So, him doing this thing that has been a pressure point for Dukat with Wayun and now the female changeling definitely probably sealed the deal for him on getting his goal promotion.
right.
Um,
Gotcha.
then, of course, we have Ducat and Wayun, who clearly don't like each other, but are forced to work together. And the female changeling kind of calls them both out on it when she's in the
Alone with
room.
Odo.
Yeah, she's like, "Do they always do that?" And he's like, "Yes,
Yeah,
yes, they do." And then, of course, we see him having to keep smiling with each other. Two
yeah,
characters who clearly don't like each other, but fit together so well.
yeah.
So
Made
well.
for each other, if you might say.
Mm,
Dependent on each other in ways they don't want to have to admit to anyone else if they could get away with it. But yeah, yeah. Jeffrey Combs as Wayoon when he was being sycophantic, it was great
mhm.
because we haven't seen him with a changeling yet. I don't think. So it's fun to see him kind of half like partially bow and talk in a simpering way,
Mhm.
but it's I don't know. It's
Jeffrey
just
Combs, he excels so well at the roles that he plays. It's really a great treat to watch, and he's always a fan favorite. And even when he's being the sycophantic Wayoon, it's great. The way that as soon as the founder walks into the wardroom and he jumps up and he like, if you notice, he like never really looks at her. He looks in her general direction. He's just always bowing his head and, oh, founder, what can I do? All
right.
of that. So it's really great to see him play it up so well. He does an excellent job. And then, of course, him, reining in Ducat, who Ducat is now trying to be like, oh, he may be your little worshiping toady, but you and I are on the same level. So I'm going to talk to you as an equal with just a hint of I'm better than you.
Yeah,
Because Cardassians, man, arrogant to a fault. They can't let it go.
yeah,
So and then of course here comes the changeling who like doesn't care at all.
yeah,
She's completely dismissive. Nope. Take down the minefield. That's all I care about. Leave me alone
yeah.
with Odo. Bye. You
Well,
know.
it is funny though because in the first episode of the season, Wayoon was giving Gold Dukat a hard time about how long it's been that they've been trying to get the minefield down. Here we are, 3 episodes later, and it's still not down. Wayoon has every right to be like, "Hey, you've been failing to get this taken care of. Here's my leader. Now you get to answer to her directly." Um, Yeah.
which is what kind of what I feel like the sense we were getting from Ducat was what he wanted all along. Like he was tired of dealing with Wayoon. He wanted to be face to face with the people who are truly in command of the Dominion. And we kind of get the feeling that um no, we don't even kind of. He says it. This is the first time that he's actually met the founder, met the change. He says it in the meeting. He's glad to have finally, met her, seen her, so forth. So it's kind of assumed that yeah, up to this point, he hadn't. He had been taking all of his direction, getting all of his information from Wayoon.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense that he would suddenly, again, he's got to puff up that chest a bit to show that he's on the same level, which just again goes back to the overall arrogance of the man and why he sucks so bad.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
just he's just awful. He's just awful.
Of
So
course.
we haven't seen Kai win, um, you know, but
Yeah.
just like any true evil genius, she stays in the back of your mind. So I'm just waiting for her to pop back up and be awful once again.
Mm,
Our
yeah.
time's coming, I'm sure.
She is one of the only few returning recurring
Recurring.
guest actors who has not shown up in this so far in this Dominion conquering the station plot line
Mhm.
so far. But yeah, knowing that, I mean, you know the show and you like the idea of her being an evil genius, like she's always plotting something. Yeah, you're right. Like she's got to have some sort of half baked egg in the background that she's trying to hatch um, to make it all in her favor, even if it's to join the Dominion and fully on embrace her commitment to
Mhm.
the Dominion. Let's do it. The emissary even gave us the idea that this was a good idea.
Well, I mean, I
Fully
was
on.
actually surprised that she didn't show up when Vedic Yasim committed suicide. I thought
Mm,
that that would have for sure been a reason for her to make an appearance, but
yeah.
she didn't. So
Oh,
I mean, now of course we can always look it up, and we know that Kai Wynn, played by Louise Fletcher, only did 19 episodes total of the show, and she did them so well. It seems like she was always here, being a pain, But yeah, only 19 episodes, so we got some more to look forward to from her for
yeah.
sure. But yeah, just 19 episodes, and man, did she use every single one of them to make a lasting impression. So.
Yep.
Um, but all right, I think that is going to do it for us on this one. Any final thoughts on Behind the Lines?
No, yeah, I do feel like this one was a little bit rocky, but I think that's kind of more in service of the larger plot as we have it right now. So, okay, let's
Mhm.
move on to the next one. So,
Absolutely. So, as I keep saying, this is the fourth episode in a six-episode arc. We've got two more before we complete this and see where our crew ends up and what's going to be coming for the rest of this season and into the next, of course. So, stay tuned for all of that. And you can always join in with us. Any questions, comments, speculations for those of you who haven't watched it or, Wikipedia or YouTubed yourself into oblivion with spoilers. Yeah, just let us know. Love to engage with you on the subject matter, of course. Quick new Trek updates: the full cast for the Star Trek Starfleet Academy show has been announced. You can head over to StarTrek.com and I believe Paramount Plus, and you can see the listing now for everybody that's on the show. Now, again, that's just a cast listing. They have not said who the characters are or who's going to play whom or anything that beyond two characters. We know one's going to be like the Commodore of Starfleet Academy, and the other one is like the main villain. All the rest of the people, while cast in the show, they have not named, no positions given, nothing. But we at least know who they are.
right.
The Section 31 movie is still in production. There is no projected release date for that yet. Star Trek Prodigy is exclusively on Netflix. I hear that this new season that dropped is fantastic. I have not watched it, but I fully intend to. Also, there's a criticism going on of the show that, despite the fact that it was initially billed as a show for kids, as an age range demographic of between like 6 and 10, 6 and 12 at the outside, this show is very much adult. So
Like very much adult, as in like it actually is
as
adult,
in
or like it
as
still
in
tickles the adult.
right, as in kids can still watch it, sure, but adults are getting way more out of it than the kids are. So
Gotcha.
that's what I mean by that. Don't go in there thinking there's going to be like animated sex scenes or whatever. I'm
No, I
sorry.
mean like
Uh,
the jokes have double entendres
Yeah, oh
that
yeah, there's some of that, but they've actually downplayed a bit of the joking nature of it. Apparently, it's a bit more action-packed, more dramatic, those things than what it used to be. Like season one had a lot about, having inner strength and finding your own path and how to, make friends and all the other kind of stuff. They seem to have departed from that in season two and are really leaning more into Star Trek in general and Trek lore and stuff like that. So I hear that it's really good, though. I have not watched it, but I hear that it's really good and a lot of great callbacks to other Trek, Voyager in particular. So if you're a Voyager fan, you're definitely going to love the second season of the show. So go and check that out on Netflix if you want. As I said earlier, all the rest of Trek is on Paramount, so you have to go and watch that there. And that's it, guys. So thanks again for joining us for another episode. And until, well, not next week because I will not be here. So we'll be off next week, but we'll be back the week after that. So until then, take care of yourselves.
thanks, guys.